Anti-government protests in the Ukrainian capital are keeping the situation on edge, with the main square barricaded and official buildings blockaded as well. The authorities, though, are not budging. The country's prime minister has accused the opposition of trying to stage a coup, not just trying to lead peaceful protests. Alexei Rashevsky is in Kiev following developments for us.
Well, this may be a fraction of what we saw on Sunday now in the streets of Kiev. On Sunday, there were literally more than 200,000 people at the very least, and some estimates even reached 1 million people in the streets of Kiev. The situation is still pretty tense, with protesters barricading themselves in central city, unwilling to go anywhere. And recent statements by the Prime Minister are adding more fuel to the fire. He said, I quote, that the fact that the protesters overtook some governmental buildings is a clear sign of an attempted coup d'etat in the country. On the other hand, he also said that the government was ready to sit at the same table with the opposition to negotiate a plan how to work this political crisis out. And he also promised that peaceful protesters will not be touched by the special forces, by the police. Also, worrying statements coming from the other side of political landscape in Ukraine, from the opposition. One of the leaders said that he expected the police to storm the city administration building, the one which the protesters captured yesterday. Last week it was all about the willingness to be in Europe. This time Ukrainians are suggesting their president should burn in hell. The language of the protest changed dramatically after last Friday's dispersal of a peaceful protest. It's still not completely clear who incited the violent attacks on City Hall and the president's office. Some accuse ultra-right-wing supporters, others say it was provocateurs. Whoever it was, the group was prepared and very well organized.
As we can see on the pictures, the attack on the municipal authorities building in Kiev has been inspired and conveyed by ultra-nationalist forces. What's quite interesting, those parties get some support and funding from NGOs, which are run by American foundations, quite active on the Ukrainian political scene.
Adding fuel to the debate around who masterminded the clashes is the continuous appearance of European politicians at Kiev's protests.
You are part of Europe, and we will support you forever.
The fact that they are essentially on the ground in Kiev, cheerleading the protesters on, calling for a revolution in the country. This is a most egregious violation of the United Nations Charter and international law, a violation of sovereignty and the non-interference in the domestic affairs of other states.
Some in Ukraine believe that these protests could go well beyond just words and disturbances on the streets. Protesters have firmly barricaded themselves in central Kiev, saying they would not leave until both the president and the government step down. With that scenario being highly unlikely, the fate of the country is once again hanging by a thread. Alexei Rashevsky, RT, reporting from Kiev in Ukraine.
And Russia's President Vladimir Putin, he says the current unrest in Ukraine is far from spontaneous, adding it's no longer about the country's failed deal with the EU, but rather an attempt at a power grab.
As I see it, what's going on in Kiev has little to do with Ukraine's relations with the EU. It's an internal political process, the opposition destabilising the legitimately elected leadership. Moreover, what's going on doesn't look like a revolution, but a well-planned action. I think they were prepared for the presidential elections in spring 2015, but had to start early. We can see well-prepared and organised militant groups. The opposition is either not always in control of what's going on, or is a political shroud for extremist actions.